All right, welcome back. Public opinion polls. All right, so these are surveys with samples of citizens used to estimate beliefs and feelings of the entire population. So there's a few important terms within that definition. First, you notice that these are taken by samples of citizens, so not the entire population. So like that question below, do you favor or oppose war with Iraq? They didn't ask all Americans, so they could actually say 59% favor and 38% oppose. Rather, they ask some smaller sample, and then they use those results to estimate how the whole population feels. And we're going to look into things that affect the results, make these polls valid, or possibly reasons that we have to be slightly skeptical at times. All right, 4 factors that affect the results of these polls. One is the knowledge of the topic. So if you ask people a question about something and they don't know or understand the question, that will affect the results because the results won't really be valid. It turns out that people will pretend to know what you're talking about. Even if it's an anonymous survey on the phone, people often won't admit that they don't know, and so that will negatively impact the results that you're getting, obviously. The wording of the question, it must be neutral. If you ask it in a leading or biased manner, then that can obviously affect the results, and you can end up with a poll that appears that people support one thing, but really it's just because of the way the question was worded. Additionally, a question that focuses only on benefits, but doesn't make any mention of the costs associated with that, that will tend to affect results, and people will favor things that when only the benefits are mentioned, but as soon as the costs are mentioned, then the support for that thing decreases immediately. And the last thing is that opinions aren't stable. They change over time. So if you were to use a poll from 10 years ago and say, hey, look, it's proof that Americans don't favor legalization of marijuana or don't support same-sex marriage, well, that wouldn't be very valid because opinions have changed quite dramatically, especially on those two issues over the last few years. All right, so we have a few different types of polls that we're going to get into in the next few slides. Entrance and exit polls, opinion polls, benchmark polls, and tracking polls. All right, so entrance and exit polls. These are polls that are conducted as voters arrive or leave polling places on election day. So we're trying to figure out, not predicting who's going to vote or how they're going to vote, we're trying to figure out how people actually voted, because these are people who are arriving or leaving the polling place. They are used to predict the election outcome, to gain insight into voter behavior, and to analyze how various demographic groups voted. So, by seeing who's actually voting, what the issues are that are driving the people who are voting on election day, this can help pollsters to be able to predict who's going to win that night even before all of the votes have been counted. So entrance polls, exit polls are used for this reason. Opinion polls, these are surveys of public opinion using a sample of the population. So this would be to get their opinion on something. So like, how do you feel about the Iraq War? Again, that's not the most timely, but whatever the issue is, do you support legalization of marijuana? That would be an opinion poll question. So survey of public opinion using, again, a sample of the population. Benchmark polls, generally these are the first poll taken by a campaign, often taken before the candidate actually announces their candidacy. So the idea is to find out where the candidate stands before they have done any campaigning. Figure out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what type of voters they should focus on. Sometimes a candidate might issue a benchmark poll, so they would hire a polling company and they would take this benchmark poll, and they'd realize, I have no business running for this office, and they don't even run. That could happen. Other times they realize certain things and strategies, where the strengths and weaknesses are, where they need to focus, all those kinds of things. So this is the first poll before the candidacy begins. Tracking polls are continuous polls that are used to chart a candidate's daily rise or drop in support. The most common one of these is the presidential approval rating poll. This is updated on a nearly daily basis, all the time. So they ask the same question: do you approve or disapprove of the way that the president is handling his job as president? And we see this all the time. This question is the same, so we get to track how the responses change to that question over time. Another option is to use focus groups. Focus group is a small group of citizens between 10 to 40 people gathered to discuss issues or candidates. It's not scientific like a public opinion poll can be, but it allows for deeper insight into a topic because you can really ask follow-up questions and figure out what people like or don't like about a candidate. The reason I have this picture or these pictures of Mitt Romney over here is because focus groups found that, focus groups liked Mitt Romney better when he was wearing blue jeans than they did when he was wearing a suit. So guess what Mitt Romney did when he campaigned? He started wearing blue jeans to the vast majority of his rallies because focus groups like that better. So it directly affected his strategy that he used. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button for me. This has been a La Money production.